Welcome back to the channel. This is episode 2 of 4, and what we will be doing today is building the top for this wine barrel patio table. It's at bar height, so I hope you're going to watch the rest of the episode how we do that. So here we are, and the dog just came in to inspect the barrel to make sure that we coated it with spar varnish the night before. And what we've done is we've coated it the night before so we can give it a sand down the next day. We'll give it a sand with 120 just to knock it down, and then give it another coat at the end of the day so we don't get dust on it. Here's a plan of what we're doing. So what we have is we're building a hexagon within the circle. We've measured the radius that we actually needed on the barrel, so we'll be building a hexagon, and that's 6 sides. We have our angles measured out there. So we gotta trim some lumber. So here we are just planing some lumber. What I'm using for it's a 2-piece top system, so this will be the skirt that will go around the barrel, and then we'll fasten the cedar to the top of it. So what I'm doing here is just planing up some 1x8, and this is cypress. You can see here that I have a miter cut on one end of the board, and that's so that I can determine what side is the short leg of the miter boards that will be forming the hexagon. So I need a really good straight edge here, so we'll be joining it, and because that will be from the point that we'll use to miter the joints, so it has to be nice and square to the piece. And then from there I'll take it onto the larger bandsaw, and what I'll do is cut it to 7.5 inches wide. That'll be the outside of our skirt, so it's going to be 2 by 7.5 inches wide, and we'll take that all the way around. And then once we get it done, and the outside doesn't have to be jointed, or I'll clean it up a little bit on the sander, but it's not as important. Here I am, now that we've got them all cut the length, and we have them all cut at 30 degrees. I'm running a spline here, joint, so it's a dado at the ends of the miter. And I decided to go with plywood. I want something strong, so I'm using exterior grade fir plywood, and that will be our spline that will run in and around the hexagon to create the apron. And what I do is just start with the blade in the center, then go back and forth, and I'll widen it until I get to the size I need. So we need 6 pieces of these, and they're all 5/16 of a groove. And then we'll take them and give them a dry fit once we get them all done. And we'll probably touch up the ends just a little bit so they fit nice and tight, but I already gave them a dry run before we started this. So there it is again, they're all put together. And what we're doing here now is we've just put the hexagon together, and we're going to mark all the joints, so when we take it apart and we start gluing it back together and putting the splines on, we have all our marks, and the marks will match up. So we're just going to put reference marks on it, as you can see, and then I laid it over our pattern to make sure that it matches the pattern. It's always good to match that. There's our reference marks. Like I said, if you're ever doing this and it's important, make sure you always put down reference marks. Just make it easy to find it. And now we're so it's held together, and we put our reference marks so nothing moves. So I just put a sacrificial board in the center there and lock that in with a bit of glue. And when I'm doing the top part of my radius, we measured down from the top 6 inches, so this will be the top part of the radius, and I'll just mark. Now we're back at the barrel, and what we do here is just lay a straight edge across the top of the barrel. A 2x4 works good, it's good and stable, and then get a piece of sacrificial board. What I've shown you there is that compass I'm using. It's by Fastcap. It's a really good compass. It has a nice broad side to it, so it's easy for scribing and stuff like this. And we'll just scribe this and go over the bandsaw and cut it out, and make sure that that marries up against the board, and then we can check the angle that we need for the apron. There it is. Now we have the pattern, and we can measure down on the pattern 6.5 inches, and that will give us the top of our apron where it's going to go. So I'll just put a mark there, and then we can measure from that point. So what we'll want is that angle going from there down, because that will be the top of the apron cut. So we measure that out, and it was 6 degrees of an angle. So I've tilted my saw here at 6 degrees and changed the blade out as well too. I want a really good cut here. I don't want to have to sand these, so it was important to have a good sharp tool and take my time to make sure that we're going around that, and that there's usually you cut away from your line and then you sand to it on a lot of projects, but I'm trying to cut as close as possible. So a new blade helps out a lot. Like I said, that's a 66 degree angle. So we're just cutting it along, and we'll need 6 of those, and then we'll do a dry fit on it again to make sure that they're all lining up. Now's the time to do it before you glue. And now we'll head over to the glue up table and check all the pieces to make sure that they're all in the right area. And here we are. And you can see I've got my splines there. They'll be going into the dados. And what I'm using here is for exterior grade plywood, and once we encapsulate it in glue, it'll give a really good tight bond. Because there's not going to be any brackets on this, I want this to be really, really strong. And whenever you're gluing end grain to end grain, it's not a very strong glue joint, so where it will be getting the strength from will be the splines. I use Type Bond 3 glue, as you can see there, the one with the duck on it. It's an exterior glue and waterproof, and it'll work really good for this application. So I'm just laying them out and trying to find my marks now and make sure they're all in the right place, and then from there I'll start to glue, and I'll let this sit for overnight. I'll want the glue to really get a good hold before we take any pressure off of it, and just trying to find the marks there and getting them. You don't have to be perfect when you're lining this up like this. It's just so when you're taking them apart. And you can see all the joints go together really good and tight. So now we'll just start to glue everything up. And what I do is I glue the joint, the dado, and the spleen to make sure that everything has a really good bond on it, in case any water seeps down through the joints. But the glue will be a good sealant on it. So we're just going to go all the way around and do them all, and it's important to have a nice flat area where you're gluing something like this down. So we have a big table, so we can lay everything down flat. You don't want to do this on sawhorses unless you have a couple of long straight edges. So I speeded up the video for you so you don't have to watch all, but I thought you'd be interested in seeing all the spleens going in. So, and you can use this for a lot of applications. It works for all kinds of things. I use it a lot on tables and stuff. And if I was doing more than 6, I'd set up a dado blade on the saw, but we're only doing 6 pieces, so it's pretty good just to adjust the blade. The only thing when you're doing this is make sure that you have a flat tooth blade for the top part of your dado. What they'll do is leave you a nice tight channel on the top instead of a offset tooth. It goes back and forth. You can see how those slide in nice and tight. Then we'll put a clamp around the outside of it. I use a so once we get the glue all into all the joints, and like I said, you can see me here really encapsulating the spleens to make sure they're good and tight. And then we'll clamp that all together with a strap clamp. I use a Bessie strap clamp, and it works really good. I'll pull it nice and tight, and then we'll throw some bar clamps on top of that just to pull the joints in. And that gets a long set overnight so that we don't have to worry about it coming apart when we're moving it. And then we'll cut off the spleens on the inside of it. If you notice my radius, they're all matched up really good. Like I said, I took my time doing the band sawing so that we didn't have any sanding to do. And if you have an older blade and you're doing something like this, you really want to make sure that you've got a nice new blade so that it will track and follow your lines for you. But if you can see the radius there, it's pretty accurate. Here I'm just piling the glue to it. Just like a puzzle. We're just getting our final piece in here, and get lots of glue on it and get it together. Like I said, the important thing is that this has got to lay flat. You don't want any twists or anything in it, and don't disturb it. It'll have about a 12-hour set so that the glue will have a chance. And the lumber that I've used has been in the shop for probably 3 or 4 years, so it's really good dry timber. And I tried to pick up really good material. If you notice, there's not a lot of knots in it. It's almost clear. If there is a knot, it'll be a tight knot. But this will be taking most of the stress with the tabletop that's going around the barrel. So I've made sure that I've picked through the lumber pile and got the best lumber that I could for it. And we should be able to slide this in, and after we get the channel all glued up. And I really put a lot of glue on the top portion of the miter because you want to make sure that it's sealed from any weather getting in there. If you get water seeping in on the top. And before we fasten the top down onto it as well, we sanded all the top, and then I took some more glue, just brushed the joint to make sure it's sealed off. So this is the day after now, so we're just taking off the bar clamps there, and we probably didn't even need those because all the joints and everything lined up really good, but it just makes sure that if there's any movement to it, but just pulls everything nice and tight. And if you can see by the radius, the radius is good, So when we slide that on the barrel, so this is the apron again. Like I said, that'll be going on. This is basically the foundation for our tabletop. So we'll just clean off those tabs now. We are just taking off our strap clamp, and once we get the strap clamp off, we'll cut off our splines. The tool I like to use to cut off our splines is a little Japanese trim saw. They work really good on a variety of things. They're nice and sharp, and we can follow that angle as well. And you can see the radius there, how everything lined up really good and nice and round. So, which is good. It's good and solid. And we just have to cut the ends off there, and then we can marry it to the barrel and make sure that it fits on nicely, and then do the rest of our work. But yeah, these little trim saws work really good. They're super sharp, and what's nice about them, they have a flexible blade so you can get into places. So there it is there with the splines cut off. Now we'll give that a sand and fit it to the barrel to make sure that it fits on nice, and check our marks. And then we're ready to start phase 3. There's the finished project. This is where we're going to. So I hope you stick around and watch the rest of the episode, and I'll show you how we got to that.